Okay, welcome back. Well, let's get right into it. So here we are again with our 10 range chart on the ES, the initial balance, and a 21 EMA applied. Okay, so as I was noting in the earlier video here, we're just going to go to Algo. That's how we're going to access it, right? You've seen the basic parameters that are by default on the chart. Now, we haven't created an Algo, so the first thing that's going to load up here is just a blank designer. Now, this is the design template. We also have a logic template. By default, it's going to land on design. Now, I think what you'll find is for very basic Algo creation, when you're just getting started, you may find it easier to work in logic, and that's what we're going to do. As the complexity of your algorithms increase, this where you get a real visual overview of what you've created, you may find this a better fit for complex algos. But for basic design here, we're just going to work with the logic. Now, as we look at it here, just basic file management up at the top. This is now be careful to save everything you're doing, because if you create an algo here and then you go, oh, okay, well, let's go look at it here and check in on it, and you close this and then go, okay, well, let me come back to it and tweak it. Well, if you didn't save it, it won't be there. Now you have to create it all over again. So I just encourage always save, right? So you don't lose something here to be frustrated. So with that said, the rest of this here will have more meaning as we progress and we'll look at stats and equity and trades, etc., as we create an algo. But let's just deal with the very basics here. So by default, you're going to see your choices here. You've got and, you've got or, and you've got at least. You've got continuous or one shot. Let's just work with the defaults. Grouping is something we'll get into as we add more complexity. And then the one thing that we do want to do here is we want to create a condition just so that we can get started on one. So we're going to create condition. Now, by default, what's going to show here is this is just the default setting. Close of the current bar is greater or equal than the close of the current bar. Well, that would be the opposite for a short. Now, you actually are seeing a result here just based off of that. Well, that's going to be a whole lot of trades and likely not a very good result, as you see here in the equity curve. And this is what I was describing earlier. You may not want all of that chart real estate taken up every single time you open it up. So that's where here we can take them on or add them back as you choose, which is why by default I turn those off, right? Because if I want to see them, I can do it here. Personal preference. Okay, well, so because that's the default and that's not really the algo that we're trying to create. Now you could leave that if you wanted to, right? If a current bar is you're on high or low, or you could leave it if you wanted to. It probably wouldn't have dramatic results here, but for our purposes here, we're gonna change that, because I'm going to start with the basic algo, and the template's going to be very first thing I want to do is create the RTH session only. So I only want to look at trades between 9:30 Eastern and 4 o'clock Eastern time. So all I'm going to do here is now go to my initial condition here. I'm going to highlight here because I'm going to change it. So I'm going to come over here, and now as we look here, we've got a couple of columns here for long and short, and then A and B, and then in the center we have our operator. Extending signals, we'll get into that as we progress with the complexity of the algos we're designing, but for just basic functionality here, we're just going to work with this. I think if you say it out loud to yourself, if you're getting stuck, that can make it easier. So what is it we want to do? Well, for our type here, where we have a drop-down menu to give us some choices here. Well, we're not interested in price. We're interested in time. So I'm going to click time. And for my operator, I want the time to be greater than, and then I'm going to go to my clock menu here. In this case here, for the opening, I want it to be greater than 9:30. So I'm going to get to my little wheel here, and 8:31 is probably fine. So we don't get caught in that initial opening backwash. So 9:31 a.m. Let's click check. Okay, so we're only going to look at trades that occur, or conditions that occur after 9:30. Now I also want to create the end of the day. So same thing. I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to change from price type. I'm going to change to time. And for this, I want the operator to be less than. So I'm coming over here, and again, for those of you that have experience with this, forgive me, I know this is very rudimentary here, but for those that are just getting started with this, we've got to go through this here. So as we have it here, I'm going to click the check mark here so it sticks. Less than 4, less than 4, right? So it knows that we're creating the time filter for less than, right? Since it's using time and not price. So so just now we've created that. So the only thing we're seeing here is trades between 9:30 and 4. It's actually quite a few trades. Well, okay, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to tie it to that 21 EMA. So the next thing we're going to do, again, we're going to go to here on our entry signals, we're going to go to condition, and we're going to come to our, again, that's just the default reading. Now here we do want to focus on price. So we want the current bar's price, the value being the bar's close. In our case here, we can do greater than. Should work for us here. Well, what do we want it greater than? We want it greater than or less than the 21 EMA. So for type and bar value here, now I'm going to go here for type. I have some default choices here, but I'm going to go to new. I'm going to tell it something new. When I do new, it's going to give the complete list of all of the indicators that I have on my machine, or you're going to have on your machine. Every indicator choice that I have on my machine, whether they're custom indicators, whether they're R indicators, whether they're native Ninja, they're all going to be listed here. So any indicator you have on your machine will be here. Well, for our purposes here, we're looking for that EMA. All right, so here's the EMA slope color. Now the default of that indicator is 14. We're going to change it to 21. The plot, this is just color, so that's not relevant to this particular indicator. So I'm going to click OK. Now you'll note here that by default it knows that for a long greater than and for a short less than. So you don't have to do it twice. Now as we look at that, now as you'll recall, I mentioned here you're getting real-time feedback here from this. So if we look at this and we just say, okay, well between 9:30 and 4, close of the bar is above or below that EMA. Oh, it's not looking so good. So perhaps a little tweaking would be something we'd want to consider here. So now, this is, as I was talking before. Now, because I've just created this and I don't want to lose it and have to do it again, I'm going to do save as here. And I'm going to go, oh, YouTube playlist here. Oh, I'm just going to call this A1 basic test. Okay, right? So I'm just going to call that basic test here just so I don't lose it. So A1 basic test now. So if I tweaked, changed, I always have this to refer back to just as a baseline. All right, so I've got that 21 EMA. I look at that and I go, okay, well, what's with the green and red? Okay, well, now you'll recall that by default we had this set to continuous, and essentially what it's like a background filter. It's basically showing you when it's below here, the 21 EMA, it's going to highlight every one of those bars with a red stripe because those are the conditions that we set for entry. Now, for trading purposes, we don't want to be entering a new position with every one of those, but that's what the algo is doing as a result of being in continuous. If I change it to one shot, it's just going to say, okay, well, when it's first there, take the trade. But we don't need to necessarily continue with each bar here. So for that condition here, we're going to leave this as just that EMA slope. And here, I want you to be aware that you have that option here. So because it can be wait a minute, what is all that? You'll note here, and this would be relevant to the auto trader here in terms of whether if it takes a trade and hits its target, do you want to take another trade if the conditions are still met, i.e. below the EMA in this case. That's what it's doing, but you don't necessarily want that for every back test. I just want you to know that it's an option for you. So I'm going to change this back to one shot here for this test here, and you'll note that it's already taking some trades here. Well, let's go over here. What we're going to do is we're going to set a condition for it. We haven't set anything yet. I think that's just something that I was working on earlier here. It's just defaulting to it. Obviously, not a very good result, right? We can see that it's traded off of 22 days. Not a very good result. So obviously, we have a start on something here, but not likely to be something we want to trade. So while we have entry and exit signals, let's go back to our entry signals here and just review this briefly here. Now, before we're going to get into this on subsequent videos here. The next one will go into the ATM, but I just want to review this here for our conditions. Right? So the only thing we have told it is between the RTH hours, above, below, take the trade. We haven't done anything about target, stop, none of that. That's where we'll go next, but I just want to cover these very basic conditions here, and then we'll add complexity. We'll add an exit signal. We don't have anything for exit signals yet. We'll do some optimization for the ATM, and then we'll review the results in the Monte Carlo and the reports, so we can start to refine. Even a basic indicator like this can ultimately be quite profitable, which is why I want you to understand that complexity does not necessarily equal better results. But we'll get into that as we go. So I'm going to pause here and we'll move on to the next video in part 3. But for right now, again, I just wanted to go over the very basic design elements here. You can see if I come over to design, now everything we just did is here in the design window. When 9:30 to 4, and then the EMA slope. And so if all of these conditions are met and we see all of these, then we want to create the output being the entry. Right? And you see the same parameters are over here. It's just a question of how do you want to see it. Again, for basic stuff, I think you'll find that easier. Okay, we'll dig into the additional features here in the next video. So with that, I will see you there.